Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI.FinNews. Today, I bring you a headline that puts one of the most powerful tech giants under the spotlight, Google. The United Kingdom has launched a new antitrust investigation that could change the game for the company. What's at stake? Its dominance in search engines and digital advertising, with potential global repercussions. But that's not all. From the United States to Europe, Japan, and Canada, Google is facing a wave of legal cases challenging its market power. Could this be the beginning of the end for its monopoly? Stay with me, because in this episode we'll break down this story and its implications for the global tech industry. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going deep on something that's been in the headlines a lot lately. Google and all the antitrust cases they're facing.
Yeah, it's quite a bit to untangle, huh?
Oh, absolutely. We've got news articles, court documents, you name it, even perspectives from different countries.
It's global, that's for sure.
It is, and that's what we're going to try to do today, sort of like zoom out and get the big picture of what's going on.
So good.
So whether you're into tech or just interested in, how much power these big companies have, I think this deep dive will be right up your alley.
Definitely. And you know what's really interesting? It's not just one country. It's like the whole world is suddenly paying attention to Google's power.
Yeah. It's like everyone woke up and was like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
So let's start with the big one. The UK, their Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, they just launched another investigation into Google.
Yep. And they're really focused on search, like that little box we all use every day, to find stuff online.
That's the one.
Well, the CMA is concerned that Google, having like over 90% of the UK's search queries, it might actually be hurting businesses there.
So it's not just about whether we as users, like using Google, it's whether their dominance is actually like preventing competition.
Right, and here's where it gets even more interesting. The UK passed this new law, the DMCC Act, which gives the CMA some real teeth. They can actually force Google to change how they do business.
So it's not just about watching anymore, they're ready to actually step in and do something.
Exactly.
Now, hopping across the pond to the US, things are heating up there too. A judge just ruled that Google has an illegal monopoly in search.
Yeah. This case, it looked at two main things. First, all those agreements Google makes to be the default search engine on, like every phone and browser.
Right, so you pretty much have to go out of your way to not use Google.
Pretty much. And then the second thing is how they price their ads. It's, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly creating a fair playing field.
So they're built into how we search, and then their pricing might be squeezing out any competition.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And then there's the big one, right? The Department of Justice actually recommending that Google should sell its Chrome browser.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Right.
I mean, think about it. You probably use Chrome, right?
I do.
Most people do. And the DOJ thinks that by controlling Chrome, Google's also controlling how we access information online.
It's a pretty huge jump from saying, hey, play nice, to you got to change the whole game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, Google's fighting back hard. They called the DOJ's idea a radical plan, but, that's not surprising, is it?
Not at all. And this isn't even the end of it, right? There's another U.S. trial focusing on Google's digital advertising practices. So it seems like they're coming at this from all angles.
Yeah, they are. And the impact of these cases, well, it could totally change how we use the internet. It's not just about Google anymore. It's about the future of information online.
Whoa, that's deep.
It is. It makes you wonder, though, is the U.S. taking cues from other countries? I mean, some have been looking into Google for much longer.
That's a good point. We can't forget about the EU. They've been on Google's case for over a decade, right? Like investigations going all the way back to 2010.
That's right.
So the EU's been kind of leading the charge in a way. Tell me more about that.
Well, back in 2013, they went after Google Shopping. They said Google was, giving its own shopping results preferential treatment. Ended up hitting them with a $2.42 billion fine.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah.
They didn't stop there, did they?
Nope. The EU then went after Google's Android operating system. They basically said Google was making it way too hard for people to install apps from anywhere other than the Google Play Store. That one resulted in a record fine, almost $5 billion.
Wow. So the EU has been actively trying to rein in Google's power for a while now.
Yeah, you could say they're kind of paving the way for others. And they even implemented this new Digital Markets Act, or DMA. It basically labels some big online platforms like Google's parent company Alphabet as gatekeepers.
Gatekeepers? What does that even mean?
It means, they have to play by a whole new set of rules, all about making sure there's fair competition online. The EU's basically saying, look, you're too big, you have too much power, so we need extra safeguards.
I see. So it's not just the UK and US, it's a global movement.
You got it. We're seeing investigations pop up all over Australia, Japan, Canada, you name it. They're all asking the same question.
Yeah.
Is Google playing fair?
Okay, so we've got the UK, the US, the EU, plus a bunch of other countries all looking into Google. It feels like everyone's getting in on the action, so where do we even go from here?
Let's zoom in a bit. Let's take a closer look at what some of these other countries are focusing on, like Japan, for example. They're concerned about the contracts Google has with smartphone makers.
Oh, you mean like pre-installing Google apps on phones?
Exactly. Japan's Fair Trade Commission thinks Google might be using these contracts to, make it hard for other search engines to get a chance.
So it's all about who controls that first screen you see when you turn on your phone. That's the battleground, huh?
It's a big part of it, for sure. And if the Japanese regulators decide against Google, they could issue a cease and desist order. That would be a big blow to Google.
Wow, yeah, it would. And then there's Canada. They're taking on Google for anti-competitive practices in ad tech. That sounds pretty specific.
It is complex stuff. Basically, Canada's worried that Google's tools and practices are giving them an unfair advantage in digital advertising, making it, hard for others to compete. And they're not messing around. They've recommended that Google actually sell off 2 of its ad tech tools.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It is. It shows just how intertwined all of Google's businesses are and how that raises red flags when it comes to competition.
It's almost like they're trying to untangle a giant web.
A good way to put it.
And speaking of webs, Australia has their own issues with Google, and Apple for that matter, thanks to a lawsuit from Epic Games, the makers of Fortnite. This one's a little different, right?
It is. This one's more about the fees and restrictions in app stores. Epic Games is basically arguing that both Google and Apple have way too much power over app developers because of those app stores.
It's fascinating how many different countries are tackling these tech giants in different ways.
It really is.
It's like everyone's trying to figure out how to regulate this whole new digital world.
You got it. We've gone from a few isolated concerns to a global movement. Everyone's scrutinizing the power of these big tech companies.
Yeah.
It's like a collective realization.
Yeah, like we're at a turning point. And the decisions made in these cases, they could have massive implications for the future of the internet. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already, and honestly, it feels like we're just getting started.
Barely scratched the surface, haven't we?
Barely. There's still so much to unpack.
For sure. So, in the next part, we're going to go deeper into some of these individual cases and try to figure out what the potential outcomes might be. We'll also talk about what a future with a less dominant Google could actually look like, so stick with us.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
All right, so before we went to break, we were talking about Epic Games, the company that makes Fortnite, and how they're suing both Google and Apple over those App Store practices.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is.
Because it really gets to the heart of how much control these tech companies have, over developers, over what apps we can even use, how much we pay.
Right, those app stores are the gateway to the entire app world on our phones.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what's Epic Games actually saying here?
Well, their argument is that Google's Play Store and Apple's App Store, they're basically monopolies. They get to set all the rules, like how apps get distributed, what fees developers have to cough up, even what payment systems they can use.
So if I'm a developer and I want to sell an upgrade within my app, I have to go through Google or Apple and pay them a cut.
Yep, that's how it works.
And Epic thinks that cut is too big. Way too big, they say. And their argument is that it stifles innovation. It limits what consumers get to choose from. If developers are stuck playing by Google and Apple's rules, well, that impacts what apps get made, the quality, all of that.
Yeah, I get it. It's like if there was only one grocery store in town, they could charge whatever they wanted.
Right.
No competition.
Exactly. That's the idea. And it's not just about the money either. Epic's saying this setup hurts innovation too. Imagine if every app developer had to use the same payment system or follow the same super strict rules. It would be kind of stifling, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would kill creativity for sure. So it's not just about lower prices, it's about having a whole bunch of different apps out there.
Exactly.
But Google and Apple, they're not just going to sit back and take this, are they?
Of course not. They're pushing back hard. Their side of the story is that their app stores provide a valuable service, right?
Yeah.
security, quality control, that kind of thing. They're saying the fees are fair for all the resources they provide to developers.
It sounds like a pretty strong argument on both sides.
It is.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but this case in Australia, it just reminds me of how many ways countries are going after Google. We talked about search, advertising, those mobile operating systems, now app stores. It's a lot.
It really shows how much Google is a part of our digital lives. It's not just one thing.
Right.
It's a whole ecosystem.
Right. And every case, whether it's in the UK, US, EU, or somewhere else, it boils down to that same question.
Oh,
Does Google have too much power?
that's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And it's getting harder and harder to ignore. I mean, just look at how big Google is, how much they touch our lives. It's a global conversation now. Like, what role do we want these companies to play?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting how different countries are trying different things. Some are hitting them with fines, some want to break them up. The EU with their gatekeeper thing. It's like a whole bunch of experiments are running at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every country's trying to figure out that balance, right? Between, like, letting companies innovate, but also protecting competition.
It makes you wonder, what would it even look like if Google wasn't so big?
Right. Like, imagine all these different search engines actually competing.
Right.
Or developers who could just, get their apps out there without going through Google's store.
It's almost hard to picture it after all this time with Google being, well, Google.
I know, right?
Would it even be better? I mean, they make good stuff.
Well, for sure, Google's done some amazing things. But the question is, was there a cost to all that? If their dominance is stopping other companies from coming up with even better things, then maybe we're missing out.
So it's not about, like, hating Google. It's about making sure the rules are fair for everyone.
That's a good way to put it. It's about making sure everyone has a shot. These antitrust cases aren't just about punishing Google. They're about, like, shaping the whole internet for the future, making sure it works for everyone.
That's a great point. This is giving me a lot to think about.
Me too.
Okay, so we talked about how different countries are approaching this, but what about, regular people? How are they reacting to all of this?
Oh, that's a big one. And I think it's safe to say that people are definitely more aware of this stuff now. They're thinking about all the data Google collects, how their algorithms work, even if those algorithms are fair or not.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense that these companies have gotten too big, maybe too powerful.
For sure. And that's feeding into the debate about, how to regulate them, the whole antitrust thing. People are starting to ask, should any company have this much control over our information, how we communicate, our whole online experience?
It's like we're at a crossroads. On one hand, we've got all these amazing technologies that connect us. We get information, entertainment, all that. But then there's that worry about who's really in control and how it's all being used.
You nailed it.
Did I?
Yeah. And that's what makes these antitrust cases so important. It's not just legal stuff. It's making us think about what technology means in our lives, the power dynamics, all of it.
This is a lot to unpack.
It is.
But I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Me too.
We've only just started to explore this, though, right? There's more to consider.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the last part, we're going to dive into some of the potential outcomes of all this. Like, what happens if Google actually gets broken up? What are the arguments for and against it? And what would it mean for the whole tech industry? It's going to be good, so stay tuned.
So we've spent this whole deep dive talking about all these antitrust cases against Google, how they're happening everywhere, and what a big deal they are for, well, the future of pretty much everything online. But what actually happens next? What are the possible outcomes of all of this?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? And it's tricky. There's no easy answer, like a one-size-fits-all solution. And whatever happens could be huge, not just for Google, but for everyone, the whole tech industry, even just like how we use the internet every single day.
No pressure then.
Right.
Okay, so let's try to break this down. What are some of the things that could actually happen?
Well, one that's been getting a lot of attention, people are talking about it, is breaking up Google.
Okay, hold on. Break up Google. What does that even mean? Like, take a hammer to it?
Huh. Not quite that dramatic, but it would be a major, major change. Basically, it could mean forcing Google to spin off some of their big businesses.
Yep.
Like search would be its own thing, advertising separate, maybe even YouTube would be independent.
So instead of one giant Google, we'd have like several smaller companies, each one focusing on something specific.
Exactly. And the thinking behind this is that it would boost competition. You'd have more companies out there trying to get your attention, each one trying to be the best at what they do.
It sounds like a pretty big move. Why would anyone want to do that?
Well, the people who support this idea, they say it's the only way to make things fair again, to actually restore competition. They argue that right now Google is just too big, too powerful, like it's everywhere, and it's really hard for anyone else to even get started.
So it's like Google's this massive tree, and it's blocking all the sunlight from any new little trees that are trying to grow.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And they say this lack of competition, it ends up hurting us, the people who use Google's products. It means less innovation, fewer choices, and sometimes even higher prices.
I can see that, but isn't there like another side to this? What about the downsides of breaking up a company like Google?
Oh, definitely. There are a lot of people who say, whoa, hold on, this is a really drastic step, and it might backfire. They're worried it could actually lead to less innovation, things becoming less efficient, and even a worse experience for us online. Like things don't work together as well anymore.
So it's like taking apart a perfectly good car engine and then realizing, oops, maybe those parts were better off together.
Right. And some people are worried that if you break up Google, it would make it harder to develop new things, integrate services. Think about how everything works together now. Your search history helps YouTube recommend stuff you might like. Your location data helps you find restaurants on Google Maps. It's all connected.
Yeah, that is pretty convenient. It seems like there's a trade-off here. Like more competition could be good, but maybe we'd lose some of the good stuff too.
Exactly. It's a balance. And it's not just about money either. There's the whole political side of things, social implications. Some people say breaking up Google could actually make it harder to keep them in check, when it comes to stuff like data privacy and what content they allow. It's a big, tangled web.
It sounds like there's no simple answer. So breaking up Google, that's one option. What else is on the table?
Well, even if they don't get broken up, Google might still have to make some big changes to how they do business. Like courts could say, hey, you have to operate all these different parts of your company separately, at arm's length. No more unfairly favoring one part over another or using data in a way that squashes competition.
So even if it stays one giant company, they'd have to play by stricter rules, give smaller companies a fighting chance.
That's the idea. And then, of course, there are the fines. We've already seen the EU hitting Google with billions of dollars in fines, and other countries might do the same.
Yikes. Even for Google, that must sting a little.
Oh yeah, those fines are meant to hurt. The idea is to make it so expensive for companies to do shady stuff that they just won't do it, like a financial timeout.
A very, very expensive timeout. But I guess the big goal here with all of this is to make the internet a more competitive place, more innovation, a better experience for all of us, not just for a few giant companies.
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
It feels like we're in uncharted territory though, right? Figuring out how to deal with these massive companies that have become such a huge part of our lives.
Totally. It's a new world.
Yeah.
And these antitrust cases, they're going to set the rules for years to come. They're going to shape how we use technology, how we get information, even how we connect with each other. It's a lot of responsibility.
It is. It's been a wild deep dive, but it's also like a little overwhelming. What's the one thing you think our listeners should take away from all of this?
I think the big takeaway is that the internet isn't like a finished thing. It's still being shaped right now by the choices we make, the conversations we have, what we do. So stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those hard questions. It matters.
That's great advice. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us into the world of Google and antitrust. We hope you found it informative, maybe even a little thought-provoking.
This has been fun.
And remember, this is just the beginning. The future of the internet, well, it's kind of up to all of us. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us on AI Breaking News. We're signing off for today, but we'll see you in the next episode with more analysis and breaking news. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and see you next time.